What is your name?
Israel or Joe Sachs.
Where were you born?
I was born in a small town in Poland, in Europe. The town was called Przyrów. I was born in 1926, March 25th of 1926. The actual family was very small, just mom and dad and my brother. My father was a tailor and my mom was a housekeeper, but there was a large extended family, nearly 100 members throughout, but they didn't all live in the same town. They were in many different cities in Poland. Well, I was attending a cheder, which is a Jewish religious school, certain hours a week, and the 5 days a week I attended a public school, which was under the auspices of the Catholic Church, because it was a small town. We had no Jewish public schools. I would say we weren't always comfortable in class because there were there were children, other students were calling out the Jews and calling different names on us until the teacher would make sure that they stopped doing that. So we went through this practically every day before the teacher arrived. And sometimes outside that play, during break, there would be some scuffing, some, non-Jewish kids would attack the Jewish kids and so on, but nothing that was considered serious. We just continued with school as best we could.
Describe the day the Germans came into your town.
That's a day hard to forget. We were, as a matter of fact, we lived not too far from the German border. The German army crossed at night on September 1st of 1939. They crossed into Poland. That day, September 1st, I remember we were out in the street and watching the planes come through, fly through, and suddenly we heard the bombs. We saw the bombs explode, so we ran into the house, and that was the very first time when we were attacked by the German army. Well, there was a lot of harassment by the Nazi soldiers. People were shot in the street for no reason, just to threaten, to show that they had the power to do whatever they wanted to do. And many people were killed. Many civilians were killed. For the first 2 years, people were assigned to work in factories that were set up for the German army. There were factories that made shoes, boots, uniforms for the army, and they employed the Jews in these factories. You were given a ration card if you worked, and with that ration card, your family could occasionally, if it was available, obtain a loaf of bread or a little sugar or something like that. There was hardly any nourishing food given to the Jewish quarters. The ghetto started about 2 years down the line after the war started. And just before the ghetto opened up, before they started sending people to live in the ghetto, I was arrested at the factory where I was working and sent off to a camp. So I was not in the ghetto, I was in a labor camp at the time the ghetto opened up. However, the rest of my family was in the ghetto, and they worked in the factories. You couldn't buy any food because everything was looted by the Nazis. All the foods, all the clothes, everything they could, they carried off. From there on, forever, for the next few years, there was nothing left in the house that was of any value, not even clothing. They took everything out, and of course, they ordered the Jewish families to submit all the jewelry if they had any and all that. Anything that was against the orders of the German authorities was punished by death. They arrested people in the factories when they needed more labor in the camps. So they arrested people, sent them off to various camps to build the camps for the future. And that's where I was arrested and sent off. Matter of fact, my father was arrested at the same time because I worked near my father at the factory. But after a few days, my father was released from the holding area where they held the prisoners, and then put us on the trains and sent us off to a labor camp. There was a whistle in the morning like at dawn, and everybody got up and got in front of the barrack, lined up, and a lot of chaotic stuff went on. People were being beaten and tried to put in line, to line up national, as if we were, as if we were a military, but we were actually prisoners. All kinds of edicts were read to us, the laws, the rules, and of behavior in the camp. After that, we lined up for a cup of what they called coffee. It was not, but anyway, it looked like coffee. And so we got a piece of bread with that coffee. And after we received that, we got in line again to walk out from the camp to a work site where we worked for the day. And the work was done under the eye of the military, of the Nazi guards, plus support that they used from civilians. You see, the prisoners that had come before us were already very, very, their health was almost totally destroyed, and yet they had to walk to work and do work. If they didn't, they were punished immediately on the spot as you were. And this would go on till the end of the day, sometimes late into the evening, and you were marched back to camp and line up for what they called dinner soup. There was no nourishing food in the soup. Basically, it was just water with a vegetable, if any. After that, you were just had to get on your bunk. Lights were turned down, and you were ordered to keep quiet. And of course, some fell asleep, others were just crying their way into a sleep. And this is how we spent a day in labor camp. And it's gotten worse from day to day, more difficult. From that camp, I was transferred to another camp, which was defined as a concentration camp. And in a concentration camp, essentially they concentrated prisoners if their life deteriorated to a point where they just couldn't go to work. They would be sent to a camp where they had the gas chambers or the crematoria. That was the end camp. I was in labor camp about a year. After that, I was in another camp, in a concentration camp, for nearly almost a year. Then I was sent to another concentration camp. Throughout the 2.5, nearly 3 years, from the time I was sent to labor camp, I was through 3 more camps. So I was a total of 4 different camps to the end of the war. What kept me going essentially was the hope that I will someday see my family. That's basically what kept most people going. It wasn't the food that we needed. It wasn't any such thing. It's that hope, that spark of life that we had sometime, hoping to meet your family again. Obviously, it was a great feeling. We were just hoping to get well enough to move around, and everybody wanted to get home, wherever home may have been. We were all far away from home. I never got home simply because by the time I get to within the country, we heard news that the non-Jewish population was very much organized against bringing the Jews back into the country. It was a very anti-Semitic country where I came from, and so they were basically chasing you back out. After that, it took a long time for me to go through various camps, various civilian camps, to look for people in my family. Of course, I never found anyone. And so eventually I settled in a displaced persons camp. I met my wife at one of those DP camps. It was a small camp. They were surviving, young women and young men surviving, and they were organized into a DP camp. It's about 170 or 180 young people, and that's where I met my wife, and we got married a few months later. It was very difficult to come to the United States, even though I had guarantees to the government from all family that I found in the United States, distant family. But they gave the guarantee to the government that I will not become a burden to the American government. It was just indescribable to get off the plane. Most survivors came in by ship, but somehow we got on a military plane to bring us over, and you get off the plane in the United States. After the entire ordeal that we went through in the 6 years of the war, it is indescribable a feeling. It was another one of those very, very days that will always stay in your memory. But I came to the United States. It was very difficult to get a job, and on top of that, the earnings, the pay for a new person in the dental lab was very low. And so I found another uncle through my first uncle, and he had a factory of ladies' clothes. And so I found him, and he took me into his factory to work there. It took us a number of years to settle in properly with a decent salary, and the 2 kids went to school, and we lived in our own apartment like free people anywhere. My message to your generation has always been stand up for your rights and for your fellow man or woman's rights. And the next thing is to remember the destruction of the world, and especially their destruction of the Jewish people. You need to put your knowledge and your strength into creating a better world than what we have now.